Hello and welcome to Saturday Service, the podcast all about faith and football with me, Graham Boozy. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Mr. Phil Twite. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, thanks, Graham. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Thank you very much for giving me the time of day.
Oh, you're more
I,
than welcome.
I think, full disclosure, we should let the listeners know that I spent an entire 2 week period um, talking to you, thinking you were a man from Scotland. And I think it's a demonstration of your kindness that you've still agreed to be on the podcast after
Uh,
that insanity.
that was funny. Yeah, that was a funny thing.
My personal highlight was sending a message. I thought you were a Celtic supporter, so I sent you a message saying my condolences
Yeah.
because Celtic had just lost, and I thought receiving that completely out of context is
Yeah.
wild.
Well, I must admit, being to be a Celtic fan at the minute is a very up and down. It's a very
Yeah,
up and down thing. They are going through something.
absolutely.
Mm.
So yeah, would you mind just sharing a tiny bit about your current background and where you find yourself at the moment?
Yeah, of course. My name is Phil. I'm from Chelmsford. I moved away when I was at university. I went to Hertfordshire University. I studied music composition. That was cool. I was going to be in a band and make loads of money and be rich and be famous and all that kind of stuff. And we had a good 5 minutes, and then I needed to get a job, and that was that was that. And I moved back to Chelmsford, and then went over to Harlow for 7 years. Five years ago, came back to Chelmsford, which is great. Got some kids, got two kids, so having them here in a great city, lots for them to do. So that's really where I am at the minute. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. I always start with football.
Please do.
It's what
I
came
support.
first. It's what came first in my life. So
Yeah.
um, I'm always really intrigued as to whether people have like an origin story.
Yeah.
For me, there's a really definitive moment where I decided I absolutely loved football, and that was Alan Shearer scoring against Holland in the Euro '96.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this is it. So I was just wondering if you had a memory at all of early moments in football that you really thought, oh, this is something I'm into.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd probably get it out there. I'm a Wigan supporter. I don't know whether you knew that, whether your listeners probably didn't. From Chelmsford, I know that's a weird one. I got so many stories of that. But as a kid, I didn't really. Well, as a really young kid, I supported Manchester United, like loads of people did. Because in the early '90s, they were the team to support. They were great. They were box office. But my dad was a Romford supporter, and he went to the 1949 FA Trophy final at Wembley against Bromley. I think they lost 2-1.
Okay.
But he went there, so he was a Romford fan. But Romford went bust in the 70s. I appreciate they did come back subsequently, although he didn't really follow them after then. So
Mm.
growing up, I was teamless from a heritage point of view. But one of my best friends was a Wigan Warriors rugby league fan.
Right.
So I used to love rugby league, rugby union as well, both of them. And I remember on TV. I wish I could remember what game it was, but it was an FA Cup, a fairly early round FA Cup game, and it was Wigan were against someone slightly higher. Back in the days when Wigan were down in the third and fourth tier, and I just saw Wigan, and I was like, oh, that's Wigan and Wigan. There you go. I'm going to support them. I was probably like 8, 9,
Right.
something
Okay.
like that, and I didn't know where Wigan was. I didn't. I had no idea the amount of trouble that I was about to put my
Yeah.
future self into. No clue. And from then on, yeah, it's a mad ride really with Wigan, because from a proper rags to riches to rags. Where we went climbing up after that. Dave Whelan took us up and up and up and up, and 8 years in the Premier League and some amazing times. League Cup final, obviously winning the FA Cup. The final day in 2007, 6, 7 season, I think, where we played Sheffield United away, had to win to stay in the Premier League. and Sheffield United only needed to draw, and we were 2-1 up, and then Lee McCulloch got sent off. It was it was the most horrible. However, like I will say, if anyone's ever seen the highlights of that, and has any doubt into Emil Heskey's quality as a football player, he was absolutely ridiculously good that day, and kept us in the Premier League pretty much single handedly. The amount of times he decided at, like, I don't know if he was told to, but it looked like he decided from like the 60th minute he was just going to play centre back. So he just went
Right.
and sat between, I think it may well have been Paul Sharner and Emerson Boyce. No, David Unsworth was on the pitch at that point. So he was sitting between them. And the amount of times they had the through ball and they're through on goal and my head is in my hands. And Heskey comes flying out of nowhere to clear the ball up. So yeah, many ups. Obviously, none bigger than 2013.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always been intrigued what it's like to support a club that, I've watched as a Southend United supporter. I've watched
Mm,
many a club sort of find their way up the league and
yeah,
disappear away from us. Like
yeah,
we used to put Wigan to the sword, and then all of a
yeah,
sudden we saw them going through the leagues. And I guess my question would be, how do you frame that? Do you feel happy that it happened, or is there a certain degree of sadness that went away and you've sort of kind of reverted to type almost? Is it worth the up and
yeah,
down?
yeah. It does for sad old middle aging men like us. I guess
Yeah,
it is great because I can tell my kids when they're old enough to care that Wigan had these great achievements. We used to go and beat Arsenal, and we beat United to stop Ferguson winning the league. We had those kind of moments, and we used to fill out stadiums. But then, as you say, like it would then. It's sad when it comes crashing down,
yeah,
and as you say, you have that managed or unmanaged decline
mm,
that takes your team backwards. And it has been thorough decline for the last sort of 12 years. I mean, we've won 3 league titles in the last 12 years, so we have had good times. But
yeah,
all three have been League One titles, where we would have liked to have thought when we came down from 8 years in the Premier League that we'd have sat in the Championship and probably
yeah,
been a Blackburn. Well, Blackburn went down to League One as well, but like they've all had it.
yeah,
But at the minute, I would say it is pretty bleak. Um, I was actually counted up the other day. We'd been deducted 29 points in the last 6 seasons,
wow,
which is mad when you think about it. With an administration and almost a liquidation in a second bout of incredible, horrendous bad luck we had. But yeah, I took my kids and my wife up to the DW, it's the Brick now, up to Wigan last year. It was the first time I've actually managed to get my wife in 17 years to go to Wigan. Um,
right,
and they actually thoroughly enjoyed it. But it was really interesting to be able to explain to Ray. She had strange concept as to why there was quite a large stadium in Wigan,
yeah,
but it was only half full. And why would they build such a big stadium? And I have to effectively say, well, it's because it harks back from a time where we were much bigger.
yeah,
And we
exactly.
had a lot more fans.
Mm.
Yeah, it is interesting. I've got a fantastic, interesting story. Actually, I don't know. It might not be fantastic, might be boring, but
No, I don't think so.
I rarely meet Wigan fans, as I'm sure you probably not met that many. Um,
No.
Down here, I rarely meet them. But back in the day, there was I used to go to the Globe in Chelmsford and watch Premier League. Well, Premier League football. The Saturday games, whatever the Sunday games. Whenever I was around, I'd go in there
Mm.
and watch games. And there was a vicar in Chelmsford who was from Wigan, and
Okay.
she used to come in, and I used to love it on a Sunday. I used to go in and watch the early kickoff on Sunday, and she would come in on Sunday, and I swear honestly, it was probably 10 past 11. She'd come in, dog collar on, and she'd go to the bar and get a big glass of red wine, and she'd sit down and watch the football
Nice.
with a glass of wine and get her lunch. And this is quite a few Sundays she would do this. And I often used to think she'd kick all the fans out, all of her parishioners out on the
Yeah, the
dot,
game's on.
wrap up the sermon, lock the doors, and come down to the pub. I never really asked her that, but obviously 3 days after we won the FA Cup, we played Arsenal, that frightful Monday. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. No, it was Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday evening. We were. I was in there, and she was in there with some family, and they'd all been to Wembley, got the flags out, and we were sitting together, and we were 1-0 down quite early on, and then Sean Maloney pulled one back just before half time, so it's 1-1, and there was still hope, and we've had hope before with Wigan, and
Yeah.
managed to pull off multiple great escapes. And then in the second half, I remember playing James MacArthur. Was it McCarthy? One of the two James McCarths scored a goal, and I remember all of us went nuts because we were like, "This is it! It's happening!" Only to see the offside flag rightly raised eventually.
Yeah.
And then Arsenal got one, and then got two, and then three, and that was it. We were done. We were relegated, and but it was really interesting to be in there with her and her family, and then.
Yeah, I mean that's quite unusual I think to find another Wigan fan in
Yeah,
Chelmsford. I don't
yeah,
think that. I think you're part of a select group with the greatest of
for
respects.
sure. There's not many.
So, do you often get to go and watch Wigan, or is it kind of commitments with
Oh,
obviously your own
yeah.
football career?
I go. I probably go 2 or 3 times a year. I try and go at least 3 times a year to see. We'll go up to Wigan once a year, and we'll go to any local-ish games. So who do I have? Well, we got Arsenal coming up, ironically. So that will be. I'm definitely going to Arsenal. Booked
Oh,
that one.
excellent!
Got lucky because that was Valentine's Day. So, but it ended up moving it to the Sunday. So that works out well.
Excellent.
Leighton Orient I went to last year. Cambridge, Peterborough. I've been to Southend. Goodness me, mate, you've got a strange away end there.
So that's our old home end.
Is it?
Yeah. So
Wow.
back in the good old days, when I were a lad, that was terracing.
Yeah.
And it was the home end, and
Yeah.
we got this double-barreled roof, which created this monstrous roar. And we used to put big teams to the sword in that stadium, but for some reason they swapped them
That's a shame.
and bolted a load of seats to the terracing.
Right.
So you might have remembered a complete lack of legroom.
Yeah.
Because it's just it's quite something.
It was very tight there. I remember we went up that year, and you beat us 3-1, and you had one of our old players who was rubbish for us, Marc-Antoine Fortuné.
Yes. Oh my word, that is a blast from the past.
He scored 2 for you against us, and he did the old man walking stick celebration.
Excellent. Southend have had so many players like play for us, be awful, and then go on to have storied careers. We're a bit of a curse, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
So is there, aside from the obvious FA Cup final, is there a particular favourite memory from your time supporting Wigan?
I mean, it's really hard to beat the FA Cup.
Yeah,
for a team like us, as that is very, very difficult. I must admit, relegating West Ham at the DW was a fantastic day. People forget as well. We were also relegated. We were relegated at half time. We were down, and we were 2-0. I was in a pub in Hatfield, the town inn. I remember it to this day, and it was one of those pubs where you could ask the landlord to put whatever game on whatever TV, and he would find it somehow. And it was when would this been? This would have been 2010, 11 season possibly. And we'd gone on a bit of a run. We were desperate for a win, and West Ham came up and were 2-0 up at half time, and we were down, and it came I remember the 3 goals. Charles Nzogbe, who I think to this day is probably the most talented player to ever play for Wigan. He was an incredible player. He scored a free kick early on in the second half, and then a player you may never have heard of, who only ever scored 1 goal for Wigan, was Connor Salmon, a striker we bought from Kilmarnock.
I know Connor Salmon very well. Yeah.
Oh, you do? There you go.
Yeah.
We bought him from Kilmarnock, and he was. I always remember his song "Feed the Fish and He Will Score," but he scored a great goal against West Ham to make it 2-2. And then it was back and forth, and Charles Nzogbe did what he does and just ripped up left hand side, the right hand side, sorry, and then stuck it in the bottom corner and 3-2. And that was the famous game where Avram Grant was sacked 10 minutes after the game for West Ham,
Blimey.
and he wasn't allowed back on the team bus apparently from Wigan. So
It's
that's
always delightful that, if things are going wrong for you, you might as well just drag whoever's around you
wow.
down with you.
That's it. Yeah.
Trash the gaff on the way out. Just,
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, in fact, I mean, it was. Both teams, probably didn't deserve to stay up that year because neither of us were very good. But West Ham ended up in a position where they were relegated with that game. We managed to give ourselves a lifeline against Stoke. We managed to beat Stoke the week after, so we survived on the final day to live another day. Yeah, and as I say, we wouldn't have won the FA Cup without that game. So as much as I like the Sheffield United game, I love the FA Cup. We'll always have that. I think probably that one would be my favourite. Although I really enjoyed, we beat Newcastle. We went on a mad run the season after where we were 5 points clear of bottom at Christmas, and then won 7 of our last 9 games. And one of those was a 4-0 against Newcastle. We absolutely smashed them. And also the 1-0 against United, which stopped Fergie from winning the league.
Yeah.
And it meant that he effectively stayed on another season to make sure he did it the next year. That 1-0 against United was underrated as a performance. That was another superb performance. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we all know about beating Man United 1-0. We had a bit of that down here as well.
You did. I remember that.
Yeah,
Hey, that must have been a big one for you.
Yeah, it was huge, and that was a good team as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the kids,
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah.
So you talked about Charles and Zogbia. Would he stand out as a player that you admired most at Wigan? Or
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to bore your listeners, but I could talk for so long about players that I loved at Wigan. I think he was the most talented that we've had. Like the things that he could do with the ball were just out of this world at Premier League level. For that level of team, obviously we've had players lower down who've done brilliant things. But he was, I think he was the most talented. Players I admire, strangely, probably is Jordi Gomez is probably one of my favourites. I used to call him Jordi Slomez. He used to wind me up no end for. But I think as a from my own footballing career, is probably the player I tried to model myself on the most was him. I think he was just tactically brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The way he moved around the pitch dictated the pace of the game. He got. I mean, I don't have 2 feet. I have half a foot. Definitely don't have anything on my left. But he was wonderfully 2-footed. Yeah. I remember the League Cup, the FA Cup semi-final at Millwall against Millwall at Wembley. I was so frustrated with him because he just didn't seem up to the pace. And he was he just didn't look. We got 2 Jameses, James McCarthy and MacArthur, who were both had their incredible players in their own right, and a much faster tempo in my opinion. But about 75 minutes into the game, Jordi Gomez just got a ball out of nowhere and just slotted a through ball only he could slot into Callum Manaman, who scored to seal us the win. And that just sums up the sort of player he was able to do. He just looked like he was jogging everywhere lightly.
Yeah.
Never really sprinted anywhere, but he didn't really need to because he was just always in the right place at the right time. And he's a typical Spanish tactical player.
Yeah.
A technical player. He was brilliant. Yeah.
Nice. Well, let's go into your football career. So have you always just played for Central Baptist FC, or did you play for another
No,
team before?
I played all over the place. I played the majority of my career probably for Central Baptist. I played a bit of university. I played for another team for a few years, and then when I was back in Chelmsford, the minister, one of the youth minister at the time, called me up from Central Baptist, and it was the church I used to go to as a kid, and my family goes to.
Right.
I was going to a different church by that point, but he called me up. And he just said, "Hi Phil, we're starting a team at the minute. there's only about 6 of us. Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, perfect timing because I literally just finished playing football." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll I'll come and do it. So we used to train over like concrete tennis courts, and there was only 6 or 7 of us to start with. Yeah, and then it sort of built up and built up over that summer, and we joined the league that year. And we didn't, stupidly, I think we didn't. I think we did have a pre-season friendly booked, but we didn't play it in the end. So the first game of the season was our first game, and we had
Right.
so many sort of church dads, and
Yeah.
I was one of the I was 21 at the time, and I think because I was young, I remember vividly being put left wing for the first game, and the youth minister was right wing. I remember that kickoff like it was yesterday. It was against Rayleigh, and it was the we got the ball, like we started kickoff, so the kickoff went back. Obviously, the old two people kickoff at the time went back to our defensive midfielder who sat on the ball and got robbed instantly, and we were about 1-0 down within about 5 minutes, and we got trounced 7-1. But I did get the first assist that day, our first ever assist for the team, where I think I was down the left hand side, and the ball came to me, and I just did a little run into the box, and I'm going to be honest, I smacked it just as hard as I could goalwards, as I think anyone would,
Yeah.
I sliced it. I was about to say I shanked it. I sliced it, and a guy called Paul Moira, who, if anyone knows of him from Central Baptist, knows he's probably at the time definitely he's not really that much of a football player. And I'm sure he would agree.
Yeah.
But man, he tried, and he ghosted it at the back post, and he just bellied it in.
Nice.
And like the celebrations is superb.
Excellent.
Yeah, great time. So I've played for Central Baptist ever since. Managed captain for a while, and then the manager left mid-season. The management team, there were 2 others. Basically, I went and had a meeting with them in the pub, and they just said, like, do you want to take it over? We'll limit to the end of the season if you don't want to, but if you want to take it over, you can, and we'll back you. And I was like, wow. Okay, I was quite young. I was 26, and I was like 26, 27 maybe at that point, and I was like, okay. I still want to play football, mind, but I found it important, and maybe we'll discuss it. Different areas of things to do, but I wanted to. If I was going to manage, I was going to manage and not play.
Hmm.
So I took over as manager, and I just used to play 2-minute cameos at the end of
Yeah.
each game. So I would. I'm a sado who keeps my stats. So I kept my stats rolling,
Not at all.
but I didn't play for those 3 years while I was
I
managing.
I have to reassure you that when it comes to stats, you're in good company, so don't
Oh, I'm
apologise
glad.
for keeping hold of them. I'm a big fan of the stats.
Oh, good stuff.
Um, so I appreciate most people that might listen to this are from a religious background, but if
Mm,
anyone's from a secular background, can you give us an idea? How does it impact it being a church league? What differences are there? I appreciate you prayed before the game
yeah,
as a collective, but I was just wondering because in my head I've got this image of a very polite game, and I don't think I've gone through various stats on various leagues, and that doesn't read as being really gentlemanly.
yeah,
It's still competitive, so I'm
yeah.
interested as to how it's different, basically.
Oh, wow. I would love it to be very gentlemanly at times. It's very much not a lot
Yeah.
of the time. How does it differ? We firstly, it's a Christian focused league.
Mm,
So I guess the point of that is, as you say, we start with a prayer before all games. I think that I think even the non Christians in the league would tell you that's really important, and it sort of sets ourselves a different standard on how we try and act ourselves on the football pitch. Now we are all guilty, myself very much included, for being a bit of a hothead at times,
mm,
going a little bit overboard, having a go at the ref. But what it basically means is to try and we try and act in a strange way how we think Jesus would act on a football pitch,
yeah.
and try and act like in that fashion. We try and love each other.
Mm,
We're all from different backgrounds. We're all from different faiths. There's multiple different faiths, let alone Christians, on our league,
okay.
and it's great to have everyone there. And we just try and we just try and hold ourselves to a higher standard than maybe we can actually achieve. That's what we try and do. Just try and achieve a little bit better from ourselves.
Yeah, I think intention's important, but at the end of the day, football will bring out certain characteristics
Yeah.
without fail, and I don't think you can get away from that because
No.
otherwise you wouldn't have a competitive league necessarily. It would be a bit
Yeah. And I wouldn't want that.
no.
I don't think the chaps would want that. This is a competitive league. We all want to win. There are certain teams that I am desperate to beat, and
Okay,
I have to, and sometimes that's because I have absolute batterings in my mind from when we played in the past. And but it is to try and hold ourselves to a standard, and it also means when we to try and make sure that we all shake hands at the end of the game and we all pat each other on the back and say, have a mutual respect for each other.
yeah,
Uh,
which I think that's really important. I think that's how football should be played, isn't it?
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
So what does Central Baptist mean to you playing for them? Is it, obviously
Oh
you played for them such a long time,
yeah,
and we can talk about. I'm also interested that you played for them for a long time from the very beginning. How did it feel to win the league about a couple of years
oh,
ago? What was that like? A just culmination of? Yeah, I'm just
yeah.
interested.
It was. We were. I think we got. I never thought we'd be in a position to win the league. We'd never been. Well, I don't think we'd ever finished higher than fourth before that point. We'd had to that point two cup finals. One was my last game as manager, and I honestly thought being a Wigan fan, the cup is very cups are
Yeah.
important. That's really important to me because it's a final. It's a thing. I got to the cup final in my last game as manager in 2019, and we were 2-0 up at Haybridge Stadium, and
Oh
then
yeah.
lost 3-2. So I was at yeah, I will have to live with that. That's something that I will live with. I also played in a cup final, I think in 2014 against Billericay Baptist Church, and I lost that day. So I thought the league was out of our reach. Really, we'd never really been able to get to a position where we could compete to that level.
Mm,
We got close after I was manager. I should point out actually, when I finished managing, I wasn't. It wasn't a given that I was going to be playing again for Central Baptist. I didn't want to. My captain at the time, Tim, who you've spoken
yeah.
to, who was on the management committee for the league. He was my captain. He took over as manager, and I didn't want to step in his toes at all. So
Mm,
I'd sort of said that I would, take a step back and I'll probably play for someone else or see what happens. And but he was very kind and said, no, I would love for you to come play. You can still do something for me. So I was very grateful for him because he's given me a second wind really, which was great. But we got close, but hadn't we got close, but not really quite good enough for a couple of years. And then that year we beat the top two teams from the previous season in our first two games, and then we beat two other teams to win our first four. And after winning four games, we were like, right, okay, we need to take this very, very seriously now.
mm,
And we just managed to keep going. But we had not an unexpected loss, but we had a loss against a team called Bethel, who they are Stoke City of our football league. They are just super super hard to beat.
right. Okay.
Very 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 well drilled. They defended like kings that day, and they had they had one attack, one goal, and they beat us 1-0. And it was one of those ones where you're just like, oh, why we've done this. So we let the league slip, and we had to. I was said to the Bethel manager that day. I was so angry. It was one of those things where I should have held myself maybe to a higher standard. Tried
Yeah.
to. He's a good friend of mine at the time. Chris was the manager, and for Bethel. And I remember saying to him, I was like, "You need to stump up performances like this against the other teams at the top league. You have to." And he was playing Danbury the week after, and we had to just hope something happened against Danbury, and we didn't have a game, so I went down to watch with a couple of the guys, and I remember as I got there, the game had just kicked off, and Danbury smashed Bethel's bar like a rattler. And I remember being like, oh goodness. And Bethel did what they did, and they just defended and defended and defended, and then broke up the other end and scored. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute. Hello, hello, hello. So just WhatsApping the Central Baptist guys, like, Danbury, Bethel 1-0 up. And then they defended and just kept breaking and scored a second. It was 2-0. And I remember being like, guys, this is back on.
happening.
We're back in the lead. Yeah, Danbury then, I think they got one back, but Bethel held on for the win. And we had some horrible games after then, or like just 1-0s, 2-1s, where we played awfully, but we just had to get the job done. And we actually sadly didn't win the league ourselves. It was Bethel again who got another result for us, where they beat someone else, and they were very nearly mounted to push themselves, but it meant that we won. We won the league without playing a game.
Right.
But then, our final game of the season, we'd already won the league, and it was against Bethel, strangely, and we played them 1-2-0. I scored both goals, which is very, very rare. But we lifted the trophy that day. It was my dad was there. It was a cracking day. We had loads of fans, the kids, recorded it, and the sun was shining. It was a beautiful day. So that was that was pinnacle. It doesn't get much better than that for me, I don't think.
I love how you talk about it as well, because I only played like 2 seasons of with a reserve team.
Wow.
And my performance, me being put on, I think was a sympathy vote. I was incredibly hardworking, but I'm not I'm an awful footballer.
Yeah.
And but I love hearing you talk about it, because you're talking about it like it.
Well,
you're really invested, and that's really cool. Really cool to hear.
That's the important thing. Football is for everyone, regardless of quality. I'm hardly a quality player myself, but hard working is super important. I'd much rather have a bunch of hardworking players than a whole load of lazy technical football players on my team. One thing I did, I always say when I was manager, and I'd push it now for all the managers and young teams out there, is to take the players that you got. If you've got players come in who maybe aren't quite up to standard, is to try and just get everyone to get up a level, just up a level. So he might not be a technically very good player, but just get a player where he can trap a ball and pass a ball, to get a player where he can get the pace to be able to get back behind the ball when you're under a bit of pressure. Just to get the players, get players that when they get the ball to be able to move it on a little bit quicker than they would normally. And these little steps will help, really average players to be able to hold their own at this kind of level. And that's all I ask. I would happily play with anyone who's never played football before, never even kicked a ball before. But if they try hard and they work hard and they want to try and improve themselves a little bit, that's what it's about. That's absolutely what it's about. Yeah.
It sounds like you've obviously being a manager and all that, you have to put a lot of work in, but it sounds like you've got an awful lot from it yourself.
Yeah,
because you sort of lit up a little bit when you were talking about it, so it's lovely.
It's my life. What I will say, Graham, is it was time. It was time with my dad. My dad, to sob story, he died sadly last year. The year before, actually, it was 2024. No, it's fine. It's not no problem. But he was, and Tim mentioned him actually in your piece.
Yeah,
he used to come to every game, regardless of whether I was there or not. And that's one thing that's interesting about church football is church. I said this at his funeral. It is interesting. Church football is very different, because it's like playing for a village team almost. You're sort of representing a group of people, 200, 300, 400 people. Some of these churches are massive, by the way. Central Baptist is a massive church, as is Danbury Mission in our league. Big churches. RCCG got loads of people. I know Stortford's a big church. They have a lot of people in them. So it is like you're representing all those people, and I guess all the offshoots of what those churches have. And but he used to come to every game, even if I wasn't there. He would go to Stortford to go watch a game without
yeah,
me, even if I'm not there. So he'd go half hour, 40 minutes away. He'd get the bus quite often to games. So when I was, even when I was manager for those periods, and we'd have an awful game, he'd never have a go or ask, say I should change something or whatever. He would just always go, it wasn't very good today, was it? Some of the lads maybe didn't work as hard as maybe we could have done, or maybe this, but he would never question anything. But it was sort of my time with him,
mm,
um, and it was when I saw him maybe on a Tuesday or Wednesday or something, I'd pop in and see him, and he would go, "Oh, who we got on Saturday? Is it Bethel away, or is it Braintree, or is RCCG or someone? Oh, great! Is it home or is it away?" And I'd be like, "Oh, it's away." And he used to love away games because
right,
he'd just go and explore, and we get there early, and he'd just go for a walk, and he'd just
mm,
walk around, and then bring his chair and his hip flask. And so that, I think, right, Graham, I think that's why I get such a buzz from football and from this league. It is, it was definitely difficult after he died to
mm,
try and get that buzz back,
yeah,
from football. But I think the buzz is really is that he would have hated me not to not play anymore or not go. I know that he would still go watch games even if I wasn't there. So he's probably watching them now. So that's probably
this
why I
is
still
it.
go. Yeah.
And I think that is one of the intersections between football and church,
Mm.
isn't it? I think they offer quite similar things in terms of purpose, in terms of community.
Yeah.
And would you view the club as some form of outreach at all?
Yes.
Speaking of that community.
Some people disagree with this, but I actually I do class the team as a church. It is a church. Some people, it's their kind of worship's a bit of an interesting one with church. Some people agree worship, some people don't necessarily. But we play there in respect for Jesus,
Yeah.
and for our Christianity as a whole, and to try and be a support and a love for all of us,
Mm,
whether we have a faith, whether we have a different faith, or whether we have no faith. I think it's that is what we are. And we are. There were many players in our league for all of our teams that don't have a faith. They've never been to church. They probably will never go to church, and we may well be the only Christian touch they will ever receive in their lives.
mm,
So, be that as may, I think is so important that we're there, because in 30 years' time, one of these guys might be sitting with grandkids in his Christmas, and someone brings up something about Christianity and goes, "Oh, do you know, I used to play in a Christian league years ago.
mm.
That was interesting," and that might be as far as that goes, but that is enough, because that's why we're there. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's important, certainly from a personal perspective, just knowing about all these leagues and all these teams, like Man City, Everton, whoever,
yeah,
they were all, formed by the clergy as a means to offer, football for people as a way of, escaping poverty in their cases.
mm,
And for me, I think it's so important because I saw that, and I hate using this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. It normalized it to me because I was brought up in a secular household, and I
mm.
came to Christianity recently. This
Wow,
is so I this has only been over the last. I've always believed in a God. That was my extent. So even
yeah,
as a child, I believed there was God,
yeah,
and but I grew up secular. I didn't really investigate it, and for me, it was the football. Seeing people playing in the name of Jesus and God was
wow,
what that was enough for me because I love football, so I identified with that, and it was like, and this is all good then, and it was my gateway into it, and
yeah.
talking to people like yourselves, it really cemented it for me. So I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but
No,
it's
well, congratulations. I mean, that's fantastic. That sort of story is sadly rarer these days. I think,
mm,
certainly as an adult in today's day and age. We did have a player who came into the church. We've had a couple that have come into to gone into churches necessarily from our teams that have gone. What is this about? And
mm,
popped into Sunday services, and one of them has become much more regular. So in itself is a good thing. I would also argue that it is important for Christians that go to our league that then are maybe exposed to other types of Christianity, other faiths, to
Yeah.
explore those and to talk to people about them. With there are multiple different kinds of churches in our league, and they all believe very different things,
Yeah, of course.
and some vastly different. And I think it's important that we all talk to each other to sort of explain how we, where do we come from? How do you hold the Bible? How do you hold some of the books in the Bible? Do you some people hold it as the complete and utter gospel
Mm.
without error, and other people don't believe a lot of the books of written by Paul were actually written by Paul. So it is
Yeah.
interesting, and so where does that hold? And I think that is really important for some of our chaps in our league. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because we have like three different churches in our area that it's a collective basically, but there's about 6 or 7 different sects using the church buildings over the weekend. I was really
wow,
surprised by that initially. I thought in my head I thought church is church.
yeah,
Everyone's so yeah. I appreciate it's a good way to bring that together and
yeah.
have conversations. If it's okay with you, we just move
Mhm.
on to your faith, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you were brought up a Christian, and
Yes. Yeah, I was brought up in Central Baptist Church, so
right.
I was brought up a Baptist until probably 18 or 19. I'm not a big fan, strangely enough, although I think it's important that we all talk to each other. I'm not a big fan of labels of where what denomination labels of
Mm,
effectively of what you are, what you aren't. I probably I go to an Anglican church now.
yeah.
I probably identify more with that sort of slightly more left leaning than the more happy clappy churches that I've been in the past. I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of loud music and lots of throwing.
Enjoyment.
Yeah, enjoyment. No, do you know what? I go to the church. I sit at the back. I go for the sermon. I go for the sermon and I leave as quickly as I can afterwards. That was generally my Vicar Dibley. That's the sort of church I quite like to go to. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
pretty.
think we're all quite different. I'm very much. I really enjoy our communion on Wednesdays because that's very straightforward, and
Yeah,
I'm not a big singer or a big
no,
but people love it, and I have to admit I do feed off their energy, so
yeah.
it's all good for everyone. And I know this is quite a vague question, but
Mm.
I'm always interested in the part that faith has played in your life. Has there been a particular time in your life where it's really sort of stepped up for you, and or has it just been there for you and it's influenced your decision making in general, you feel? And
Yeah, I think it's always been there. I think it's evolved. I've tried to educate myself. I think, which I would thoroughly I would thoroughly encourage any Christian or non-Christian to do, but especially Christians, to try and educate yourselves as much as you can before throwing yourself into anything too serious. Look at the Bible. Let's look at the Bible. Look at the Bible objectively is so important from a Christian perspective. Look at all the books in the New Testament. Who wrote them? What was originally there? What wasn't there? Some of the books that aren't in the New Testament. The Gospel of James. That's a fascinating book. It's not in the New Testament. Our read. That those sort of things. What and then sort of take your point from where what parts do you basically look at? Do you take some of these books slightly more readily than some of the others? Some parts of them do you take more readily than others? I mean, obviously a classic example is the nativity stories. The two of them probably didn't happen,
mm,
in my opinion. Does that matter? No, not particularly, because it's a narrative, and that's the point. I think that they're trying to get across is more of a message, other than a historical realism.
mm,
Um, and I think that I sort of educated myself a fair bit more on the origins of the Bible and the historicity of the New Testament, in more recent years, and that's become it's certainly helped me sort of understand different books of the Bible, and help me understand maybe faith a little bit more. To not take everything as complete gospel, especially what you're necessarily told in Sunday school. I was taught a lot of things in the church, Central Baptist Church, as a kid that I wish that I'd have known as an adult, with an understanding of the Bible, to be able to push back on some of these things and go, I'm not sure you should really be preaching this, based off of the source material which you're going from.
Mm.
And that's yeah. Obviously, some people will say, uh, understandably so, that the New Testament is without error, without contradiction. There's loads of contradictions in the New Testament. If you read them side by side, some of the same stories. But that's the point. That's the whole point. It is
Mm.
written by human. These were written by many different people, many times up to almost 100 years after the fact. So it was, there's probably error involved, but the point of it is that there is a core message through most of these stories that we can then take and live our lives by, and I think that has really shaped my life for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is there a particular book or passage or quote, that you sort of not live by? Well, yeah.
I do, you know what? I do have one. I do actually have one. It's actually in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. It's Deuteronomy, and it is just because we use it every day at home. I use it every day at home, which came from my mum actually, which is thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn.
Nice.
And the reason you use that is that so often when my wife is cooking, or if I'm cooking, and I've got a little spoon and I'm having a little munch while I'm cooking, I get a little slap or whatever, or I look at Rachel and she's doing something, I'm looking at her eating half the dinner before it's even got onto a plate. I always come up and she'll always say, "Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn," and I just think that's just such a funny but quite a poignant passage
Yeah.
that that is quite. I think it just shows how actually it affects you day by day. You know,
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. It's
yeah,
don't quieten down the person putting in the work almost, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
quite
Don't
nice.
stop the guy who's making the dinner from eating it. While he's cooking it. Of course, so I've always enjoyed that passage, and I use it every day, near enough.
Excellent.
Just a nice little thing.
Now, one last question on faith.
Mm,
What would you say to someone who's listening to this because they like football? I'm not going to try and make you sell Christianity in a sentence because that's quite a big ask. But
yeah.
what do you feel are the core benefits of attending church and being a part of it?
Um,
And I appreciate that's a really big question.
Yeah, that
So
is that is a tricky one. Christianity, I think, is a very, very difficult. It's a difficult subject. It's very difficult. It's even for people to say they're a Christian in this
yeah,
day and age, because of the way the world is at the minute, and Christians sadly have given ourselves a very bad name through years, and church has done that. Churches sadly are just not they're not that welcoming. They would always say they are, and that's the fun thing. When you go to a church, they'll always be aware of fun, welcoming church, but they're not. And the sad reason is because churches themselves with the service are not. I mean, if you go to an evangelical church, say, and you walk in and people start talking to you and like, "Hi, how are you? Blah blah blah. Come and sit next to you. Come and sit here. Blah blah blah. Come for lunch." All this kind of stuff. They love a lunch. Get a new person in for lunch. That is a classic church trope. And then they start singing, "Praise him, praise him, praise him, praise him." Arms up in
yeah,
the air, flat, happy, clappy. The service goes on for 2.5 hours.
yeah,
Guy faints in the middle of it, and starts speaking. It's all this stuff that that is not welcoming for a non-Christian at all, and it's frightening.
yeah,
And even my church I'm the youngest person there. Well, my son is the youngest person there when we're going to take him, and that can be sort of somewhat unwelcoming because it's all very regimented. They have their particular scripts that they read. Everyone says back, particular phrases which for a non-Christian would be very difficult to do, and you could say, I just wouldn't necessarily say them. But actually, for anyone who attends a church that or would try and attend a church, that's very very difficult and intimidating.
Hmm.
So I think it's two pronged. My response probably, firstly, is I think it's so super important that churches of all denominations look at the way that they operate and try and find new ways of being being slightly less intimidating for people who come into a church who wouldn't normally,
Hmm.
because they are frightening people off. Simple.
Yeah.
And I think for anyone who's thinking of going to the church, I would say do a bit of research on Christianity objectively. Christianity has a habit, sadly, of being quite inwardly. We if you look for anything Bible related, it could be very 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 difficult to find something that's objective. To plug a non in a objectively a non-Christian podcast effectively, or is not specifically for Christian, is misquoting Jesus, with Bart Ehrman, who
Okay.
is a very a top biblical scholar who used to be Christian, is no longer,
Mm.
but he is incredible at looking at the New Testament, and he does a podcast with a Christian lady and they talk about different subjects. And did Paul really say this, or was Jesus actually or did he rise from the death, or
Mm.
this sort of thing. And so I think from a non-Christian point of view, I would say to do some research, have a little look, because you'll be surprised actually how many things a non-Christian might see and go, I don't think Jesus existed. Well, I think
Mm.
actually, there isn't really a historian out there who doesn't think that there was a man called Jesus. He probably was born in Nazareth. He probably had some followers.
Mm.
He probably did meet John the Baptist. He had a brother, or probably multiple. He probably did go to Jerusalem and probably was crucified by Pontius Pilate. So it is interesting where you see all these things, and it may be exploring those more and just exploring how you feel about it
Mm.
is super important. Faith comes in all shapes and all sizes, and it can be really big or it can be really small.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I would say to any non-Christian, I would say just have an explore the New Testament probably.
Mm.
Um, Read bits of it. Don't sit down and try and read the whole of Mark, because you're going to sit there and go, oh man, this is this is
Yeah.
heavy, and it can be very preachy at times and very difficult to read. But certainly look at some of the biblical scholars, some of the Christian scholars, and some of the non-Christian scholars, and try and make your way from there. Yeah,
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. Yeah, certainly for people who have had different backgrounds, and I know that our church is certainly trying our best to do more accessible things. I do
great.
a night prayer on YouTube, and I try and deliver it like we're having a conversation now, rather than
Yeah.
making it all,
That
flowery.
that's exactly it. That's exactly, even small things like that can make a big difference, right? Rather than necessarily being very very over the top dramatic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think speak to people rather than
yeah,
at them, and that's a good start.
for sure.
One, just to sort of wrap it all up.
Yeah.
This is probably for my own personal interests rather than anyone else. But
Mm.
when I was doing my internet stalking on you, I noticed that you're something of a musician,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I've
I
been.
had a good listen to Undercover over the past couple of weeks. Very much enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
A couple of weeks, that's a lie. Last week.
I'll look forward to
Um,
the royalty bump that I'll get from that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's quite all right. I think that's one play on Spotify is 0.001
It is
p
not
maybe.
not not four. I think it's great. It's so small. It's mad.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
So yeah, I just wanted to talk to you quickly about your passion for music. And
yeah.
one thing I really enjoyed was when I was looking at the tracks you did on the covers album. I really loved that you hit one of my favorite bands of all time, but also one of my dad's favorite artists of all time, and somehow your
Oh,
tastes sort of, you know,
Eagles.
and that, yeah, he loves Eagles, but he loves Don Henley as well.
Oh, Don Henley. Okay, yeah, yeah.
So the track on there, he's a particular fan of. I forget
New
the
York
name of
Minute.
the Don
New
Henley
York
track.
Minute. Yeah.
That's it. And one of my favourite bands of all time, and My Vitriol.
Are you
Um,
serious?
yes, 100%.
Wow.
I,
Oh,
I will die on the hill that Fine Lines, I think it was
yeah,
called,
yeah.
is just a classic
Oh,
album.
no, I don't want to cut you off. I just want to say, if anyone out there is sitting there and bored and wants to an album, not my album, Fine Lines by my Vitriol are such an underrated album.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness, yeah,
it's stunning. And also the thing was, I noticed I was expecting it to be a very just like acoustic singer songwriter
yeah.
version of the track, but no,
No, I went,
you
yeah,
went for it. You did it
yeah,
all the instrumentation.
yeah,
So, yeah, just talk a tiny bit.
yeah,
You talked briefly about it earlier at the
yeah.
start of the interview. So, yeah,
Yeah, well, yeah, I was in for absolute shameless plug. I was in a band, still in a band actually called Platform Location.
mm,
We had some fun. Our sound was probably too late for the time, but we did a lot of the London underground scene, played loads of gigs, loved it. Yeah, from sort of 2008 to 12.
mm,
We released an album, and then I think burnt out really.
yeah,
Um, my guitarist, he was just he ended up going and being far too cool for us. The drummer, he worked in London for a record label for a while, and then he moved to the US. And the bass player he was studying for a medical degree, so he's a doctor. He's all over the world, doing stuff. So we that at that point that kind of was our time, I think. But we still talk, to be fair. I'm about 65 to 70% through an album with Platform Location, so maybe 14. I think it's 2012, so it's 26 years. It's been 14 years since that album came out.
wow,
So hopefully, maybe I can get another album out with the guys in the next few years. Um,
excellent.
but Undercover was interesting because I've just done acoustic stuff. Just what I call whoring myself out for money, where I just go play bars and pubs and stuff, play
Mm.
covers and stuff where I would have been ashamed, 15, 16 years ago, looking at myself now, going, what have you become? This is outrageous. But COVID was an interesting time because it gave me this. I had loads of drums tracks recorded, before I used to record drums, I used to just jam a song, which is where my vitriol came from. Some of them, New York Minute was exactly the same. I think there was a Nickelback song on there as well. Someday,
There
where
is.
I just found it on my track, and I thought, oh, okay, right. I've got loads of time now. We're all furloughed and locked down. I might, it was before my kids were born, so I thought, just build up, this covers album of just random covers of bands that you would have heard of and bands you wouldn't necessarily have heard of. A real eclectic mix. And what actually I liked from a Christian point of view actually is there were some bands in there. So Quench, I don't know if you've heard of Quench.
I can't say I have,
Um,
to be honest.
no, there are two bands on there that are Christian bands. There's Vera Cruz, who is still going, a great band. They were one of those interesting Christian bands who they had a bit of fame way back in the day. I saw them at Shepherd's Bush supporting Joe Bonamassa, probably about nearly 20 years ago, and their first album was a commercial album, and it was really good. Well, it was a commercially available album. They did
Mm.
really well. But they're all an openly Christian band. They're still going, still releasing music. Vera Cruz, have a look at them. But also, lucky enough to meet a number of times Quench, the guys from Quench. They were a Christian band, and I remember seeing them first at Greenbelt, maybe
Right.
Greenbelt Festival, maybe 2003 or something. And I was a teenager, and they were really nice, just really nice guys. I got lucky enough to meet them. And then when I was doing this, I sent Jamie from Quench. They're long retired as a band, and I sent Jamie a message, and I said, like, just wanted to give you I just wanted your blessing, really, that I can do this, and he was just so he was so lovely, but so blessed that some random kid. Well, I wasn't a kid; I was in my 30s by then. But some random bloke in his 30s had recorded an album, a song from an album of his Christian band from 20 odd years before, and he was really kind about it. And it's quite a cool song. I quite like that one. So if you ever get bored, I think it's on Spotify. I'm pretty sure it's on Spotify, Apple Music, or that Quench Christian band. Afterglow is their album, and it's brilliant, brilliant album. Oh, they got Reality Radio. They got an EP as well. It's good. Um, yeah, always plug those guys.
Yeah, and obviously they can do that after they've searched for Phil Twite Undercover.
Oh, yeah, yeah. If you want to have a little listen, all platform location because I get more royalties from that.
Yeah,
Um, I'm on Spotify, Apple Music, that sort of stuff. You never know. You never know. In a year or two's time, there'll be some new platform music, and this might be the one that takes me out of poverty. You never know.
excellent. I
Yeah,
think it's always good to hold on to it, and
yeah.
yeah, yeah, excellent stuff. Well, I will let you go unless you have anything else you'd like to add at all.
I would just say thank you so much for the work that you do. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I mean, we've talked for the past year, really, in since you sort of hit us up from the league. I run the Facebook site, although very poorly, do the media stuff as a bit of a side note to my work with the working with the the teams in the league specifically.
Mm,
So that's something I do. You sort of dropped into our DMs at some point and about your work. I read your piece and it was absolutely superb.
that's very kind.
It was fantastic and quite moving at times. You're a very very talented chap, so
Oh, bless you.
please keep up the good work.
That's very kind. And I didn't pay you to say all these lovely things just for the
Not yet.
listeners, but not yet.
You're gonna play my album though
I
on
am. I'm going to play that on a loop overnight,
tax and all that.
and I reckon you'll have 20p by the time I'm done. So that doesn't even buy a Freddo now, does it?
It doesn't,
20p.
sadly. No, those Freddos, those shrunk and they've got more expensive. So,
Just what have we become as a
yeah,
country? It's disgraceful.
absolutely.
Well, listen, thank you ever so much. It's been really lovely to talk to you, and I found it super fascinating to hear about your time with Central Baptist. So, yeah, thank you so much for your
You
time.
are more than welcome. If you're ever about in Chelmsford, you want to see a game of terrible football, we're here.
No, that is very much on the list, Phil. So, yeah, no,
There you go.
much appreciated.
Lovely.